Chapter 29, Amino Acids, Polypeptides, and Proteins. Proteins are a polymer of amino acids that are strung together linearly. The sequence of amino acids, which we'll later see as its primary structure, will also determine the function of the protein. And it is a major class of food that people need for growth and maintenance. And there are many different functions. Some are structural and they're fibrous proteins like collagen, and some are globular and they do chemistry like enzymes. Protein classification, we have simple proteins and conjugated proteins. Simple proteins, if you hydrolyze and chop them up to their basic units, yield only single amino acids. Conjugated proteins will yield amino acids plus at least one more thing that's not an amino acid when you hydrolyze it. So there's a sugar or something besides an amino acid in that protein. So the amino acids have a carboxyl group and an amino group. Thus is why we call them amino acids. There's an amino group. Oops. There's an amino group right here. And here's your carboxylic acid group, amino acid. All of them will have a hydrogen here. And what differentiates all the amino acids is the identity of this R group. That's the one variable group which changes with every amino acid. And so we call these alpha amino acids because that is the alpha carbon. It is the carbon right next to the carboxylic acid carbon. And if we go back to the carboxylic acid chapters, this is an alpha carbon, thus making this an alpha amino acid. So the amino group is attached to the alpha carbon. The variable group is commonly referred to as the side group. And it can contain alkyl groups, aromatic groups like tyrosine or phenylalanine does, amino groups, carboxylic acid groups, alcohol groups, or sulfur-containing groups like methionine or cysteine. There are 20 amino acids which your DNA encodes for, and there are many, many, many other amino acids which are still useful in biology that your DNA does not encode for. And they're made subsequently. Amino acids are divided into 4 groups based on the characteristic of the amino acid as a whole. And let's check them out. We have nonpolar amino acids, which have nonpolar side chains. They can be aliphatic or aromatic. Polar uncharged amino acids. These have hydrophilic side chains like alcohols like serine, but no charge. Acidic amino acids, like a glutamic acid, a side chain has a carboxylic acid group on it. So there's 2 carboxylic acid groups because you have the acid from the amino acid and an additional carboxylic acid group in the side group. And basic amino acids. Here we have a side chain with a nitrogen which can act as a base, such as lysine. Alpha amino acid classification is based on the ratio of amino to carboxylic acid groups. It's a basic amino acid if there's more amino groups than carboxylic acid groups. It's neutral if there's an equal number, and it's acidic if there's more carboxylic acid groups compared to amino groups. Why? Because in neutral, physiological pH of 7, your amino groups will have a positive charge, and your carboxylic acid groups will have a negative charge. And so if you have more aminos than carboxylic acids, you'll be net positive. It'll be grabbing protons out of solution. It'll be acting like a base. If you have a neutral amount, you have a net charge of 0. So you have an even number of moieties grabbing protons and releasing protons. And it's acidic if you have more carboxylic acids than aminos because you'll have a net charge of negative because you've released more protons than you've absorbed, and so you're acting like an acid. So here we see our amino acids. Alanine, side chain is methyl. Isoleucine, we have a 2-butyl group for our side group here. Leucine, here we have an 1-methylpropyl group, or an isobutyl group as the side chain. Methionine, look at this thioether. It's a thioether because there's a sulfur instead of an oxygen acting as an ether. Phenylalanine, here we have an aromatic amino acid. Proline is a cyclic, and notice this is one of the few, if only of the first 20, but there's others outside of the original 20 that do this too, but the cycle of carbons binds up the amino nitrogen. So notice the other ones, the NH2 is free, but in proline that nitrogen actually gets wrapped up with the side group. Tryptophan, another aromatic amino acid. Valine, here we have an isopropyl group. Asparagine, now we have an amide group coming off the side chain. A cysteine, we have a sulfhydryl group coming off the side chain. Glutamine, another amide. Glycine, this is the smallest amino acid. The side chain is just hydrogen. That is as small as an amino acid can be. And that's why you find it in places where there's tight fittings, like collagen's a triple helix. And where all three strands meet together, you always find glycine, because it's the only amino acid with such a small side group that three strands can comfortably pass each other there. All right, serine, you have an alcohol group. Threonine, also an alcohol, but it's secondary alcohol as opposed to primary alcohol. Tyrosine, we have a phenol group now. There's an OH coming off of that benzene ring. So those are the polar uncharged amino acids. So we've gone over nonpolar, polar uncharged, the acidic amino acids, aspartic acid and glutamic acid. Notice the acidic amino acids have the word acid in them, letting you know they're acidic, because their side groups, their side moieties, have carboxylic acids, giving you more carboxylic acids than amino groups, and so this molecule at neutral pH is acting like an acid. And then basic amino acids, arginine, histidine, lysine, these are absorbing protons. Notice all those nitrogens. Look for nitrogens when you're looking for organic bases. And biologically, a lot of times they're called alkaloids. But these are the basic amino acids. So write the structure of an alpha amino acid that has a methyl group as a side chain. That is alanine. And if you take biochemistry, you'll see that if you deaminate, you remove the amino group, you end up with pyruvate actually. And so if you rip off the amino group of alanine, you end up with pyruvate, and then it can go into the citric acid cycle and get reduced all the way to carbon dioxide. And so that's pretty much how we use proteins as food. If you remove the amino group, and that gets packed into urea in the urea cycle, and so people remove excess nitrogen through urea, and that's why you pee, to get rid of extra nitrogen in the form of urea. The molecule that's left goes through one of the metabolic pathways of the body and can be broken all the way down to carbon dioxide to yield energy. So what is the classification of the amino acids shown below? Well, we only have one carboxylic acid group and one amino group, so it's neutral, but it's polar. We have an OH group. This is polar uncharged, and that's threonine. Which of the following is not attached to the alpha carbon of an amino acid that is used to make protein molecules? And that is the group containing a phosphorus atom. Amino acids that are in proteins contain all the groups listed except for the phosphorus atom. And so we have not seen a phosphorus atom in proteins yet. We saw phosphorus atoms we will see them with DNA and RNA, and we saw them with phospholipids, but you don't see them really with proteins, not at this stage. If you're actually doing biochemistry, adding a phosphate and removing a phosphate, there's enzymes that do that. Kinases are enzymes that add phosphates to things, and then phosphatases remove phosphates, and that's a very common on-off switch in biochemistry, but that's added later. It's not actually part of the protein, it's an additional tag that does something later. Essential amino acids are the amino acids you cannot synthesize yourself as a human being. You do not have the DNA to make it from scratch, and therefore you must get it from your diet. And here are the essential amino acids: arginine, histidine, isoleucine, leucine, lysine, methionine, phenylalanine, threonine, tryptophan, and valine. These you cannot make from other amino acids. The other 20 amino acids, here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. The other 10 basic ones are non-essential amino acids because you can synthesize them from these. So, essential amino acids a person has to get from their food. It's like a vitamin. It's an essential organic molecule you need to survive, but you cannot make for yourself, so you must get it from your diet. Which of the statement best describes essential amino acids? They cannot be synthesized by the organism and therefore must be supplied in the diet.